There are four teams remaining in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and for the most part, these teams have had sustained success in recent years, both in the regular season and in the playoffs. The Blues are hoping to become a mainstay in the playoffs once again, but in the modern NHL landscape, what should that look like for the Blues? What strategies can they learn from the Florida Panthers, the Edmonton Oilers, the Dallas Stars, and other contenders, such as roster building, on ice play, mentality? How can the Blues become a Stanley Cup contender once again? We're going to talk about all that and more today on Note News. Welcome into another episode of Note News. It's John and Alec with you as always. We're a St. Louis Blues podcast, and we go live twice a week to talk all things Blues. So if you want to keep up with off-season content, draft, free agency, trades, all that good stuff, then hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It's the best way to help us out. Like this video. If you're listening on audio, follow, rate, review, wherever you listen. That goes a long way. It really does help. And then follow us on socials. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod. You can follow along with us, get updates, hear about what's going on. We post a lot of great stuff on those platforms, so follow us and engage with us over there. Alec, these conference finals, the stories between the two are very different. In the West, you've got sort of this matchup of two heavyweights, the Edmonton Oilers, kind of a top-heavy team, although less so this year than they have been in the past. Obviously got the Stars, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl at the top. Over in Dallas, it seems like depth is sort of the story there. Development is a big thing. And then in the East, it's completely different. You've got this really one-sided matchup between the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes. It's tough to watch for myself as a Canes fan. Obviously, more of a Blues fan, but Canes enjoyer, maybe I'll say. Tough to watch that one. Florida just looks like they won another cup. Want to go to their third straight Stanley Cup final, but what do you think about these conference finals matchups?
Yeah, a moment of silence and solace for you, John, as a Canes enjoyer. I'm sorry. My heart might not be with you, but you can have like my liver or something.
Yeah, Carolina sports fandom is like North Carolina sports fandom, professional sports fandom in general is tough. I'll just say that.
mhm.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of, I don't know, interesting styles. I do think that the current conference finals teams were maybe not the expected matchups for a lot of people, but are in the same way kind of chalky, which is interesting. I think just Colorado getting upset, Tampa, um, plenty of other like opportunity or plenty of other ways to roster build. These four are kind of super min-maxed in a way, as we'll get to talking to here, which is really interesting to me that it isn't so much balance. It seems that it's more been a more condensed strategy has led to success for these four teams, with the exception of maybe Florida. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, for sure. So today we're going to be talking about each of these four teams that remain, as well as some other contenders. I think we'll talk definitely about the Washington Capitals, who what they're trying to do with their team and retool on the fly is really interesting and relevant to what the Blues are trying to do right now. We'll also talk about some other top teams like Colorado, Tampa, etc. What can the Blues learn from these teams when it comes to building a contender of their own? We're going to discuss positive takeaways and negative takeaways from each of these teams, or do our best to do that. But there's a lot that the Blues can learn from these teams, because it feels like hockey, as much if not more than any other professional sport, trends like come and go, and sort of the strategies for competition and contention change a lot more. They seem to be in flux a lot more. Whether it's the type of defenseman that you see, like we see the Blues getting bit by that right now because they hopped on the wave of the smaller puck moving defensemen. With Torrey Krug, Justin Falk, and now it seems to be like length and size is kind of the way to go when it comes to defensemen. So it seems like trends are big, and just the overall like competitive landscape changes a lot, at least a lot more than other sports, or as much as other sports. So there's a lot that the Blues can learn from these teams that are competitive currently. So why don't we go ahead and get into it? Starting with the Western Conference. So this is Dallas and Edmonton. As I said, two heavyweights. It does feel kind of chalky. I will say, I think I tried to get too cute with my bracket. I had, I think, Vegas and Colorado, which doesn't like it doesn't sound too cute, but I had Edmonton losing in the first round. Same with Dallas. Um, I had Florida losing in the first round. The only one I got right is the Canes, which feels like now I was just feeling really, really silly. But
Yeah, both. I think both of our brackets are kind of rough.
yeah, I saw you picked Tampa to win it all, so you
I
know
had repeated 2022 instead of 2024.
what were we thinking? But if Florida wins Game 4 or makes the finals, that'll be what, like 6 straight years with a Florida team in the Stanley Cup Finals. It's crazy. But let's go ahead and start with the West. Two very interesting teams, similar in a lot of ways, but also different in a lot of ways. I think. Who do you want to start with? I feel like um, both of these teams are super interesting.
I think they are interesting. Let's start with Dallas because it's a little closer to home.
Yeah, obviously a Central Division rival, Dallas Stars, who the story of their playoffs has been Mikko Rantanen, who they acquired this year, stepping up big time. Jake Ottinger helping them out a lot. Having a good goalie always helps. Miro Heiskanen has come back. He was injured for a while, but he is returning or has returned and is contributing again. Um, it seems like the big story with Dallas, as far as why they've had so much success and why they're so competitive every year, is their development, right? Like what the way that they're able to draft and develop young players and have them make an impact on the NHL level team pretty consistently. It's impressive and uh, frustrating to watch from a Blues fan perspective. You've got Wyatt Johnston, who is sort of the next star in waiting. Um, they had Logan Stankoven. He was a big player. They obviously traded him to Carolina in exchange for Mikko Rantanen. Jason Robertson is another one. So yeah, like it seems like the biggest, most positive takeaway that the Blues can sort of learn from the Dallas Stars is just solid development, solid draft strategy as being like a backbone of building a competitor. Um, and this one kind of seems like relatively obvious when it comes to building a contender in any sport. Just you've got to be able to draft well, you've got to be able to develop well, and build around the fringes as your team improves. But is it as simple as that, or do you think there's something more to it that the Blues can learn from the Stars when it comes to how they draft and develop young talent?
Well, you can't like just say that you're going to draft and develop as well as another team. I mean,
Yeah,
like scouting departments are different, talent evaluation. I think the biggest thing with um Dallas is I guess the type of players that they've identified. They've gone after like different players each time, like different types of players. Wyatt Johnston is not Jason Robertson. Stankoven was kind of somewhere in the middle. I think they've got a really interesting mix up, but it seems like right now the league wide trend is offense, offense, and offense. Um, at least, especially with Dallas, the biggest hole for sure on their roster is their defense pairings. You've got, oh wow, and they just went down 3-1 to Edmonton with like 18 seconds left in the second. Um, so the biggest thing with Dallas is that their defense is their biggest weakness, and their offense is just so full and so deep. You've got obviously the aforementioned Rantanen, who they just acquired, but even for guys that came from their draft and development, Rope Hintz, Sam Steele, Tyler Sagan, Wyatt Johnston are all like plus skaters. You know, it seems like they've got 3 or 4 good lines every single night, and each one with a real goal scorer. They're not necessarily the craftiest team. They're very precise, but also they're really really good at finishing and scoring goals. And I think that's going to be something that as we pivot to Edmonton and later Florida as well. Offense is the name of the game in the NHL right now, and specifically it's finishing and goal scoring, which kind of seems obvious, but even like you said, like length and size with defensemen is the way to go, perhaps, and that is true to a certain extent. But I
Hmm.
still think puck moving and offensive ability is a big part of how these defensemen get evaluated. So it's about, identifying a type of offense that you run, whether you run the what I call the precision passing offense, which Dallas definitely runs, whether you run a rush offense like the Blues have, or sort of just a crash the net, hair on fire offense like Montreal or Columbus, who are two of the best offenses in the league. It seems like the way that teams are skewing is identifying which style system they want to run and then maximizing the players that they can. And so they've gotten guys who can take one timers who are really good at finishing chances. And that's their calling card is offense. And that's kind of, they've got a lot of young, controllable, good offensive forwards, which is what makes them so dangerous on
They
top of the
definitely
random
do.
addition.
Yeah, and I think another really interesting thing about the Dallas Stars offense that I think feels particularly relevant for the Blues, we've been talking for so long. They need a star. They need someone who can score 40, 50 goals, someone like that. And they need someone who can break the offense up, break it wide open and be an elite scorer like that. They've got elite scorers, but their highest goal scorer this year was Jason Robertson with 35. And looking sort of down the list as you go, it's Wyatt Johnston with 33, Matt Duchene with 30, Rope Hintz 28, Marchment 22, and then it drops off from there. But they've got a decent amount of scorers between 10 and 20, a decent amount between 20 and 30, and then a decent amount between 30 and 40. It seems like the scoring isn't coming from one guy or two guys like you're seeing on the other side in Edmonton. Um, it really is divided pretty evenly. Same with assists. Like Matt Duchene, 52 assists. He led the team this year. Jason Robertson, 45. It seems really balanced the way that they're scoring. As you said, they've got multiple lines that can score and get it done, rather than just a couple star players. And it feels like with the Blues, right? You've got Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, now Dylan Holloway. It feels like they can all be in that range of 20 plus, maybe even 30 plus goal scorers. I mean, obviously Kyrou should continue to hit that. Maybe he can get to 40, but it feels like Holloway should probably be a 30 goal scorer at some point. It wouldn't be crazy to see Robert Thomas break that a couple times in his career. So in terms of like building a contender, it feels like the depth of the stars could be a big takeaway for the Blues, rather than relying on elite scoring or something like that. And that feels more like Blues hockey to me, sort of spreading the wealth around. Would I like if they could go out and get a star? Sure, that is another way to win. But it feels like with what the Blues have, that sort of style of offense and offensive strategy is maybe the easier thing to accomplish. But I don't know if you have any more thoughts there.
Yeah, just I like how you put that Blues style of offense is depth, because that often like creating chances on the rush like the Blues do, you often can, elevate the talent of like say an Alexei Toropchenko, no offense, who aren't the best precision finishers. It's not crazy to say Toropchenko is not Sam Steele, but they really have an ability to like help elevate the skill of lesser players. And that's why the strategy we've seen of getting defensive guys and getting them on rush chances has been so effective, and has been so it's like great at maximizing value, because then you get the defense of your player plus the added offense of the system. So yeah, it's not the only way to do it, but that is I think you've identified well that that's something that the Blues have done for a while, and it has led them to much success in the past.
For sure. Another positive takeaway before we pivot to, what is the cautionary tale with the Stars. And this one, it seems like the Blues have done a decent job of just pouncing when the moment is right, when the opportunity is there, being willing to pay both with money and prospects. Like the Stars could have. I mean, we'll see how the rest of these playoffs play out, but they could have added the last piece they needed in Mikko Rantanen mid-season. They were willing to pay him money, sign him to a big extension. They were willing to pay to acquire him from the Carolina Hurricanes. They sent over one of their top young players in Logan Stankoven to do that. So just being willing when the opportunity presents itself, and not shying away from paying up for talent. That's something that it feels like the Blues have done a pretty good job of, especially in the past year, identifying the opportunity in Edmonton to, with them being a little more cap strapped, being willing to sign Holloway and Broberg to double offer sheets. Like, that was bold and creative, and the opportunity presented itself, and they pounced. Same with Jim Montgomery. Doug Armstrong waited about around this time last year for Boston to lose, and they didn't. And so he signed Drew Bannister as head coach. But then when Montgomery was fired midseason, he didn't waste any time, and hopped on real quick and snatched up Montgomery. So it feels like that's something that the Blues do well. Hopefully Alex Steen can learn from that and keep that mentality moving forward once he takes the reins. But that seems like another big one that the Blues can learn from. At least we have it right. We should continue doing this because, again, it seems like they've done a good job of that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, something that Alex Steen himself, as one of those depth scorers, was pretty used to, and he knows the impact of a guy like him.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's about bringing physicality for the Blues, and it's about bringing grit and defense, and then
Mm-hmm.
you can sort of figure out the offense with a head coach like Jim Montgomery, who I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say is the best head coach in the league, maybe.
Potentially.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it could get there. I think based on how the next, few playoff appearances go for the Blues, he could definitely get there. He's definitely like one of, if not the best regular season head coach. But I think needs some playoff success to earn that title. Okay, what about like a cautionary tale or sort of a negative takeaway? Like, is there anything from the Stars that stands out to you as what the Blues should pay attention to and be cautious of when it comes to how they build their team or how they operate on the ice or in the front office? Anything like that, stand out to you?
Yeah, so I was kind of getting ahead of myself earlier, is why I stopped myself. But their defense is their weak point for sure.
Hmm.
You can definitely take advantage of what they put out every night, and I think even though they have guys with decent size, Labushkin is 6'2", Cody Ceci is 6'3", Heiskanen is 6'1", so it's not all about size. It's just that it's not really a complementary group of skill sets. And it's just not really a good group of defensemen, to be honest. That's definitely where the Stars will be looking to upgrade this season. Heiskanen is pretty much the only guy who contributes much offensively to the way that the Stars play on a night-to-night basis. I mean, and he is one of the best offensive producers on the team for sure. But I guess I should say Tomas Harley is also having a pretty good regular season. But when you look at the okay, I guess Harley had 50 points. That is pretty good. So Harley and Heiskanen are pretty much, they have got two decent defensemen who produce for them. But I mean, you look at their top point producers in the regular season this year, it was forward, 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 forward. 7th is Tomas Harley. Forward, forward, forward. 11th is Asa Lindell with 26 points in 80 games. Not very good. More of a defensive guy. So I think the way that they've sort of, why I say like they've kind of min-maxed their team here, in that the Dallas Stars have a really, really good offensive forward core and a defensive core that is supposed to be defensively excellent. The issue there is that they just don't really complement each other in any ways, because if your defensemen are so far behind the play, you're just losing numbers advantage, and you just can get out muscled down in the offensive zone. And same way, if your forwards are trying to control the neutral zone to complement their offense, then your defensive zone can, if they can gain the line, it is very easy for quickly developing rush chances to go the other way, and then you're leaving Ottinger on an island, basically, which Jake Ottinger is a really good goalie, but you never want to do that to your goalie. And that's actually how we've seen the Edmonton Oilers get ahead in this series so far, is that the Stars will try and control the neutral zone, but the Oilers have some really, really freaking strong forwards that are able to just out muscle and out hit the Stars at center ice and can then create a 2-on-1 going the other way. And especially when it's a 2-on-1 with Evan Bouchard, Leon Draisaitl,
Hmm.
or that one guy. There's just really not a ton that Ottinger can do. Which especially shout out, I feel like he doesn't get enough credit as Draisaitl being like maybe the strongest forward in the league. It's like him and Ovi are just like built like brick walls.
Maybe
But
Rantanen could be in there too, but yeah,
I don't know. I feel like Rantanen has a little bit more length, a little bit more skill. If it came pound for pound, I'm taking Dry or Ovi, I think. But yeah,
nice.
um, I would say that's definitely the way that they have troubles is just it seems like they're playing two different hockey games at a time, and that can work, but it's also there is a flaw in that system that can be exploited.
For sure. Yeah, they were seventh in, or let's see, they allowed the, excuse me, eighth most expected goals against per 60 at 5-on-5 this year. Um, the only playoff team that allowed more was the Montreal Canadiens. And then the next one down is the Caps at 12th. So yeah, that like they're just allowing the opponent to generate way too many chances. Now you look at their goals against. Jake Ottinger helped them out a lot, and they look a little better in that metric. So like the goalie's a part of the team for sure, and that production counts for sure. But he did bail them out quite a bit. It seems like so. Yeah, agree with you on that point there. Why don't we go to the other side of the West and look at the Edmonton Oilers? And I mean, as you said, the trend across the league for a lot of big teams seems to be offense, um, offense, and more offense. I don't think that's truer anywhere than it is with the Edmonton Oilers. The Edmonton Oilers, you cannot beat them in a 2-1 game. That's just not going to happen. You got to beat them 6-5. They will score. They've got two or three players, maybe even more, who will just will themselves to score. They've got Connor McDavid, the best player in the world, maybe one of the best ever, if not the best ever? Question mark? Maybe I don't
We'll
know.
see. We'll
We'll
see.
see. Yeah, could be. So yeah, and then Leon Draisaitl has a chance for the Hart Trophy this year. Yeah, McDavid had a down year, 100 points. It's crazy. And then yeah, as you pointed out, Evan Bouchard is a goal scoring defenseman, or at least an offensive defenseman. Um, so I don't know if the positive takeaway or what the Blues should learn from this is as simple as get two of the three best players in the world. It just seems like not feasible, and you can't really expect the Blues to do anything like that. And I think that sort of style of building a contender, that's the kind of tank and draft strategy that I don't see the Blues doing really ever. So it seems like that's probably not the takeaway here, but I think surprisingly the takeaway is sort of the opposite, because they haven't won yet, right? They made it to Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Finals last year, but they didn't get it done. They have yet to win a trophy with this core, and so it's still possible. And like we saw
We'll
last
see.
year
This
how
year looks.
what
I was just saying this year looks like they have a case.
Yeah, it looks a little bit different. And so I think what we learned last year is that a star player like McDavid or Draisaitl can sort of steal you a game here and there, maybe even steal you a series, but it's not always a reliable strategy. It doesn't always get it done through the entire playoffs. What they've done a much better job of this year is getting more production from some of their depth players, especially in the playoffs. So, Evan Bouchard, kind of, depth player relative to the other two, I guess, but Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Zach Hyman, Darnell Nurse. These are guys that are contributing, especially Nugent Hopkins. Connor Brown is another one. Corey Perry, he's got 7 points. Evander Kane has 7 points. So it's coming more balanced than we've
Hmm.
come to expect from them, and I feel like that's the main takeaway is that even when you have star players, the depth around them, the surrounding cast still needs to be solid. Um, or it could be, you know, you're a decent playoff team but not able to finish it out. Another takeaway with them seems to be like in goal, which I don't even know what to make of Stuart Skinner at
That's
this
just
point.
Stan Bowman. That's
Yeah,
just yeah.
it just feels like Skinner's either pitching a shutout or allowing six or five or something, and so it's tough to know what you're getting in net. But those are some of my takeaways. Is that having a playoff ready goalie like Jordan Bennington is definitely helpful. Um, Star players are definitely helpful, but again, depth seems to be the big takeaway for me with the Oilers. Do you have any you want to add, either positive or negative takeaways from the Oilers?
Yeah, I think one of each. I do think like they could have had John Gibson. I think Anaheim had a train lined up for them, and Bowman was just like, nah, I don't like it. I like Skinner better. Like, okay. Goaltending aside, I think with Edmonton, yeah, like you said, it is all offense all the way. And definitely their depth has been better this year. From a lot of guys. I also think that the way that they honestly do, to me, kind of sacrifice defense for offense like no other team in the league really.
Mm-hmm.
They play very much that crash the net style of offense. Like it's sort of like rush offense on steroids, where you're just trying to get down low as fast as you can, get in the goalie's face, create chaos, and it's a very explosive style of offense that is also very high risk. But it helps when you have, as I said, who I think is maybe the strongest player in the NHL and the best player in the NHL. Um, but I think that that's really emblematic with their defense. I mean, they seem to just have rallied around Jake Wallman, and he seems to be like a fan favorite now for Edmonton, which to me is crazy. Now, I think I'm a lot lower on Jake Wallman than a lot of other people, but I think Jake Wallman is pretty awful because he just does not play defense. Evan Bouchard does not play defense, but they're offensive guys. Darnell Nurse plays defense, not well, but those are offensive defensemen, and those are like they sacrifice defense to create offense. That on They kind of try the Carolina thing where their forward or Carolina, the Florida thing where their forwards play defense. Now the Blues thing, but it's not quite as good. Acquiring Henrique and Trent Frederick, who have been defensive-ish players, but not really like to the caliber of, like a Reinhardt or a Verhage or whatever. And so I think with them, it's just they identified that they need to score, 4, 5, 6 goals, and they're capable of doing that with just strong shots, decent speed, and yeah, just offensive wherewithal enough to create chaos, to gain the neutral or gain the offensive zone, and essentially dominate the opponent. And that starts with a guy like Zach Hyman. I think Zach Hyman really fits this Oilers model, sort of like a Jake Neighbors on steroids, with a little bit better of a shot, like a wrist shot, I should say. That type of power forward is exactly what they look for. Um, you know, it's a lot of power. It's a lot of, as I've been saying, and I think that's a way that you can win, which can work with every offensive style. Power is never a bad thing. However, it does sacrifice some defense. And so, like you said, I think depth is the key here. Is last year, guys like Connor Brown, Evander Kane was out for a lot of the year, which really hurt them. Henrique served as a good, helping their bottom six, because their bottom six last year was just atrocious. Um, they actually have Kasperi Kapanen, which is kind of funny. He actually scored the OT winner in game two, which is really funny. But yeah, it's like you said, on a positive side, you can get power, but you need depth to complement it and or defense to complement it, because that's going to be the trade-off here versus Edmonton decides that nope, it's not a trade-off. It's just we're min-maxing out this roster to get as much strength and speed as we can, and we want to pummel you into the ice. And yeah, like you said, that can work really well, especially that can work really well against these very precise teams like the Kings, like the Stars. But when you play a team like Florida, who's a very balanced overall roster, a very balanced style of play, who still sort of plays, um, offensive and aggressive hockey, it's a strategy that has some bad matchups, I guess. So I think with the Oilers, the takeaway is there are players and skill sets you can acquire, but don't lean too far into extremes because it is very easy to exploit. And maybe it can win a cup. Maybe it can, but it just might take 8 to 10 years of getting bounced again and again and again before you finally break through the barrier. And I'm not really sure that's what Alex Steen should be trying to build here into the future.
Yeah, no, I agree. It feels tough to say the takeaway from Edmonton is draft two-star players that are become the best in the world. But yeah, no, I like your analysis there, pretty sound. And I agree. I feel like the volatility of the Oilers shouldn't be something that the Blues aspire to as much as learning what works from their formula and what doesn't. So depth seems like the big one again. Well, cool. Let's go ahead and head over to the Eastern Conference where the story is much different, as we said. You've got the Florida Panthers who just went up 3 games to none last night on the Carolina Hurricanes. And it seems like the story in this series, and I think this is we can maybe talk about these two teams together, um, but just like the idea of a team that's built for the playoffs matching up against a team that's built for the regular season and operates as a regular season team. You've got Florida, like the Florida Panthers, who really are built for the playoffs, and they sort of know that they're going to get in. They just during the regular season do their thing, play their game, um, and then once they're in the playoffs, Paul Maurice and Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett, Sam Reinhart, Aaron Ekblad, they just do their thing and they just go to work. They know what it takes to win a playoff series. They know what it takes to show up in big moments and in big games. And they just have consistently done that, not just for like 1 year. And like it's not just this year. If they win their next game, if they win this series, this will be their third straight appearance in the Cup Finals. Um, so this is probably like the model team in the NHL right now, the best team in the NHL. And so, I mean, on the other hand, we see a lot of these regular season teams like Carolina, who's probably about to get bounced, or LA, who lost again to Edmonton in the first round. You've also got, Winnipeg, Toronto, Washington, teams that are really solid in the regular season, but it seems like they're just not able to reach that next level, put it together in the playoffs. I think the reason is different for each of those teams. Um, but it just seems like that's the story here. Should the Blues be building a solid regular season team who, has a chance every year, or should they be building a team that knows what it takes to win in the playoffs, and is able to unlock something else once they get there? Like, I don't know if my mind is made up here. It seems like based on the recent trends in the NHL, you look at 3 of the 4 teams that are left. These are playoff teams. Um, Carolina is a regular season team. It seems like that's the way to win is build a playoff team. I mean, starting big picture here, like, do you have any thoughts on that sort of discourse between building a team like Florida versus building a team like Carolina?
Yeah, Florida is so strange as a like roster construction example, because it just seems like things are just kind of working out in Florida right now, and I think that's mostly due to coaching. So I guess you could say get a guy like Jim Montgomery is probably going to be pretty helpful. Um, but with Florida, it's like they kind of have the golden touch right now, the Midas touch. to turn everything that enters their organization into gold. I mean, even a guy like Marchand, who is kind of having a down year, comes back and is a playoff demon once again. So it seems like what they really are trying to do here is acquire experience and acquire like playoff experience with a guy
Hmm.
like Marchand. If you think back way back when they brought in Claude Giroux, and there's sort of that meme going around a while back of they were just like acquiring former captains. So it seems like with Florida, what they've really tried to do is just get like guys who know what it takes to win in the big moments, who get to step it up. You can be the most skilled player in the world, but you have to know when to turn it on. You have to know which shift on the ice is going to be the difference making shift. And the only way to gain that is through experience, is through playing the game, and is through playing the game for a long time. And so with Florida, I really think that they've been trying to identify players who fit into that mold of playoff experience, who know what it takes to win, know the shifts that they have to win. They pick their battles so well, which is I think equal parts coaching and just on the players, like teaching each other. Um, on top of having a guy like Barkov and Sam Reinhart, who Sam Reinhart, did he score 60 last year or was it 59?
I think it
Um,
was 59 sounds right.
it was 57, but still,
Yeah.
just insane goal scoring talent. That always
Hmm.
helps. Um, they also play that sort of crash the net style of offense, where they kind of do a little bit of everything. Like Florida is just such a unique team. They're so fascinating because they kind of have their own style of hockey that I truly believe would not work for any other team in the league. And on top of that, they have playoff experience. So I think this is more of like for the Blues. I think this is more of like think of how valuable a guy like Braden Shen was last season. That's the type of player that Florida would look to acquire, and
Hmm.
sort of like the anti Vegas. Um, is like think about having a Ryan O'Reilly on the team, how valuable that was to the development of a guy like Robert Thomas. Think about like um how important like the development of Kevin Shattenkirk and Alex Petrangelo into defensive captains, essentially, like to what they could do to a guy like Colton Parayko. So it's the passing down the lineage of the team every season, having that veteran voice in the locker room to keep the locker room together and to keep the intangible parts of sports of knowing when it's time to go,
Hmm.
that is just a game feel thing. um that I think has worked out, obviously has worked out just magnificently well for them.
Yeah, I really like the way you put that. It seems like, again, yeah, like you said, the intangibles is what they're looking to acquire. It feels like Brad Marchand is a perfect fit for them. He's playing on the third line. I mean, that's crazy how deep this team is, and we can say depth is another takeaway, as we've said for every team so far. But like,
Their roster is just magical. Like it's just a
it is.
every team's dream.
But it's not just depth for depth's sake, right? It's like they're acquiring and looking for very specific types of players, like you said, and it does seem to be like they're targeting more of the intangibles, more of the mental toughness and sort of wherewithal to just step it up a notch, do whatever it takes, to win. Not be afraid to fight tough battles and get physical and stuff like that. It does seem like that's been the roster building strategy here.
Yeah. One more point I want to make is that they also are kind of the anti Oilers because each piece that they acquire, they have like you just said, they have so specifically selected their talent and what they can bring to the roster, that it works off so complimentary. So I'm looking at Daily Faceoff right now. They have the second line listed as Verhage, Bennett, Kachuk. And I think that's really emblematic of this. There are such complementary skill sets to how this Florida team wants to operate. Verhage is sort of your playmaker, your creative, interesting, like good puck handler. He's able to gain you the zone. He's able to make a cross ice pass. He's your assist guy. Sam Bennett is your puck possession guy. He's going to win faceoffs. He's going to muscle you off the puck. He's going to throw hits. He's going to be physical. And then Kachuk is the power forward, and he's also going to throw hits and be physical, but only really in the neutral zone. Like in the offensive zone, Kachuk is sort of in the low slot or in the high slot. Waiting for that Verhaeghe pass to come through, or Verhaeghe to Forsling to Kachuk, to get that one timer off. He's your sniper power forward kind of mix, which he's also just a unique skill set. But it's like that's the kind of roster building they've done here, is that each line can do similar things, and each person on the team is complementary to each other, and that's why they've found so much success, I think. I mean, even in their defensive core, just like the Edmonton Oilers, they have gone all offense all the way on defense here. Forsling, offensive guy. Nico Mikkola, who had a great game the other night, offensive guy. Seth Jones, offensive guy. Aaron Ekblad, offensive guy. They're okay defenders, but they're not Oilers defensemen bad. They're not Jake Wallman or Bouchard, but they're not great, or I would say for most of them even good defenders. Um, um, and I think that they really transition. They play the transition so well that they work so well with each line on these guys. If you have an Ekblad or a Forsling who can make a good pass to your puck possession guy, that can easily gain you the offensive zone. And then you've got your power forward following behind the puck possession guy to help maintain offensive zone pressure that can get it to your assist playmaker. And now you've got a puck moving defenseman on the weak side with the puck carrier, who's also a great puck mover in his own right. That is just like offensive, like candy bag, or in the candy store with all the options of what you can do there. That is just, it's so complimentary on Florida's roster, and that's why they're the best team in the NHL.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like another story, another takeaway that I think the Blues should make from Florida, or I guess take from Florida, is just beyond the intangibles, which I think they have done a really good job of. Like that's the first takeaway we've mentioned here, is staying true to your team identity, your team culture. Like that's something that the Blues did a really good job of cultivating this year, and hopefully something they'll continue to prioritize, because I think Florida has proven that it's valuable. Um, when it comes to winning when it matters most. Another thing is like how they have built this roster, technically speaking, how they've acquired the key components of their roster, because contrary to a team like Dallas or something, they're not really, they haven't really built this team with a lot of draft and develop. You've got Barkov that they drafted, Ekblad they drafted, but most of their other big players have been free agent signings or trades. They signed Bobrovsky in free agency. They signed Carter Verhaeghe in free agency, and then they traded for Sam Bennett, Sam Reinhart, Matthew Tkachuk. Like all of their key contributors, Brad Marchand, they just traded for this year. All of their key contributors, save one or two, have been added externally, and so I think that's something that I think a lot of hockey fans are frustrated with their team about. Is just it seems like being scared to take those big leaps and acquire players externally. I mean, could you imagine like to acquire Matthew Tkachuk? The Florida Panthers traded away they traded away Jonathan Huberdeau, who was a 100-point forward, and Mackenzie Weegar, one of their best defensemen,
And a
a,
first.
a first-round pick in this year's draft, and another prospect whose name escapes me. But like, and it worked out. Like they won that trade. Like that's insane. Like, could you imagine if the Blues did something like that?
So I think with that trade specifically, it's exactly playing into that sort of complementary skill sets ideas. So Jonathan Huberdeau, as their 1C, did exactly what they saw Barkov could do. They saw that Barkov was ready to take over as the 1C. Huberdeau was just a less good playmaker with less good defense, and just therefore didn't play quite as physical, played more in like a precision style offense. So he would be better fit somewhere else.
Hmm.
Mackenzie Weegar, I think, was just the piece that they had to make it work, because he's a good defenseman, is a great defenseman.
Yeah.
Um, but Kachuk filled that power forward role who could shoot that they didn't have on the roster. I mean, the closest at the time, I don't even know. Like, I'm not sure who exactly could fit that role. He
Yeah.
filled something that they didn't have versus Huberdeau was a little bit redundant, and credit to them that they identified it and were able to, get the right player for their team
Yeah.
in
I think
what
that's
at the
another.
time was like a nuclear move.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's just another takeaway that the Blues should have is just don't be afraid of making big moves. Are there any negative takeaways about the Florida Panthers? Like, it seems like I can't really think of one if we're being
I don't know,
honest.
man. Like they've been the best team in the league for 3 years now.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I think of any team in the league, they are probably the only one that I could look at and say, I like no notes, I guess,
yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. Then I guess we don't have to try to come up with one. Let's go ahead and pivot to the last team who does have probably more of those than they do positives, probably. In the Carolina Hurricanes,
Don't be so
who
down.
are proving once again that they just aren't built for the playoffs. Um, About to get swept for the third straight time in the Eastern Conference Finals. Um,
Maybe.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know, man. I have no words. So I think the thing about the Canes that is both their biggest strength and their biggest weakness is their system and sort of the way that they approach games. I think the positives of that, just the power of a concrete system, a concrete approach to like consistently generate solid offense, at least in the regular season, it works. And they're one of the better teams at sort of tilting the ice and generating shots and scoring chances. I think they also show the value of a strong defense. You've got Jacob Slavin, Brent Burns, like guys like that who are great defensemen, um, forwards who can play defense, that kind of stuff. I think that is a big pro, but I think the issue that the Canes run into is just an inability to adapt when that system isn't working as well as it usually does. We're seeing that right now with the Florida Panthers. That system worked really well against a lesser playoff opponent like the New Jersey Devils or like the Washington Capitals. But if you want to make the finals, you're going to have to overcome one of the better teams like Florida or maybe it would be Tampa if they had made it out of the first round. Like being unable and unable to adjust and being inflexible has really bitten the Canes here in a lot of ways. So maybe it's a mentality thing. Maybe this is just as good as they are, and they're just a regular season team. I think you know one thing about the Canes is that they approach every single game the same way, whether it's in fall or winter or in the playoffs. It's like the same mentality. Like this game matters. Go out, give it your all. And so maybe like this is just their ceiling. It's just a regular season team that can make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, but no further. I mean, it sucks to say, at least as a Canes enjoyer, but um, I think there are real pros and cons to the system that they have built, the team that they have built, and so I don't know. Like those are my thoughts on the Canes. What are yours?
Yeah. Excuse me. My apologies. I think the Canes are a really interesting case study here. But I do think that there is something to be said about just the extreme into defense in such an offensive league. I don't think it's necessarily that the Canes have a bad system. I just think that they picked their system at the wrong time.
Hmm.
And like you said, that they just have such an inability to adapt. I think with the Canes, it's easy to start with the negatives, and we can start there. But I do think there's actually a lot of positives on this roster. But we can start negative. So with the Canes, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, as you probably watch more Hurricanes hockey than I have, but it feels like they try to be this precision offense without really the playmakers to do so. I mean, Sebastian Aho is one of the best like playmakers in the league for sure. I would put him up there as like a tier one or tier two
Hmm.
forward, at least in terms of playmaking. But outside of Aho, they don't really have another guy who can do that. And furthermore, I think that they don't really have like the shooter to help him.
That's the big
Maybe
thing to
Seth
me.
Jarvis is, but he's, very young and also kind of a center. Um, and that they don't have like, so a lot of the times Aho isn't even able to reach his offensive ceiling, it feels like, because he's having to be more of a goal scorer because they just haven't been scoring goals. Um, you know, right now their goals leaderboard is Seth Jarvis led the way with 32 in the regular season. Aho was just behind him at 29. And then it's Jack Roslovic with 22 goals as their third highest goal scorer. They just don't have the sniper or like the power forward like a Jake Neighbors, who honestly would kind of cook in Carolina. Um,
Yeah,
to
he probably would.
finish, they don't have the finishing at all, like
Yeah,
anywhere on the
that's
roster.
that's the big thing to me. I think you're right in that they don't have the big finisher. They kind of lack the playmaking, but I wouldn't say that that is their strategy, their approach, and maybe it should be, but it seems more like their strategy is just rip it in from the blue line, and in the ensuing chaos, you're gonna score uh, occasionally, and like you're gonna like it's gonna work out enough to where you can put up 3 games or 3 goals in a game or something. Quantity over quality seems to be the
Mhm.
offensive strategy, and maybe that's where they've got it wrong. You're right. They don't have the playmaker. They don't have the finisher. We saw them try to add add that piece recently with Jake Gensel and then Martin Necas, who they then obviously traded for Mikko Rantanen, and I bet they're wishing they didn't trade him away to Dallas. I mean, Logan Stankoven is great. It seems like he's born to play Canes hockey, but I bet they're wishing they did have that finisher like Rantanen, and maybe he wouldn't have worked out in their system. I don't know, but um, yeah, I mean you're right in that they lack those pieces, but I think the issue is that they don't prioritize that strategy enough as well.
Mhm. Yeah, it seems like gosh, a hybrid between the offense of like crash the net, like you said, like
Hmm.
firing pucks at the net and trying to chase them down, and that like precision passing, which to me is like tip ins count as part of that because
Hmm.
not often will you try for tip ins unless you're really confident in your ability to place pucks. So it seems like kind of a hybrid between that, but they haven't built the personnel to fit that. There's no synergy on the roster. Like Svechnikov is one of their best offensive pieces, had a 30-goal season in 2022,
Hmm.
but is really good on the rush, and they just don't really play rush hockey very much. It's such a defensive, like, trying to block shots and interrupt passing lanes, and then when you get in the offensive zone, like you said, that quantity that they just haven't really built a system that's sustainable in any way to win when it matters.
Hmm.
And the way that I quantify that is essentially they haven't built a way to win game scripts. This is something that I talked about when the Blues were on their hot streak, was that they could win so many different kinds of game scripts. If things got ugly, got scrappy, the Blues could out physical you. If there was just crazy offense on both sides, the Blues could outrush chance you. If you're playing one of the best, the Kings or the Avalanche, like I guess the Avalanche are a little, but if you're playing the Kings who are just like toying with you, having their way, the Blues can get their sticks in passing lanes and maybe get a bounce the other way. That's definitely, yeah. But and then outspeed also those typically slower teams. Um but with the Canes, it's like they didn't give themselves really a fighting chance in these playoff matchups when individual lines win, individual battles win. It feels like that they've more built this team to win in the aggregate and not in the individual moments. They don't have any not any, but they don't have enough standout players who can win an individual battle.
Hmm.
Like, to be honest, a Nathan Walker. He can win a shift. Oscar Sundquist
Yeah.
showed this season that he can win shifts. It's depth guys like
Hmm.
that the Canes lack. So the negative takeaway for me for the Canes is the value of depth and of different types of ways to win. It isn't all just about, well, if we allow less goals and score more goals, we will win. It's about more of the hockey side of hockey of, okay, how do those goals get scored? How does the shift play out? What kinds of plays are being made that your team struggles with? Is it 6-on-5 hockey? Okay. How can we change our strategy or change our personnel to be better at 6-on-5 hockey. It's stuff like that the Canes, just like you said perfectly, and this is a more analytical way of breaking it down, cannot adapt to different game scripts. They just don't have the ability. They have built for one thing, and if their game script doesn't win, they don't win. And Florida is just so good at dismantling game scripts. That's just the kind of team they are too. I think that's definitely part of the discussion. So I do think there is some positives with the Canes roster building, though,
Hmm.
is that I think that they really have a seriously impressive ability to control the neutral zone and their defensive zone. But I mean, you kind of have an advantage in your defensive zone, just numbers wise. But the way that they can sort of they play the trap really well, essentially.
Hmm.
That requires speed, but also like hand-eye coordination to knock stuff down and just hockey IQ. They're a very smart team, just not with, like we've been saying, enough skill to complement it. That's there's really something to be said. Again, I think a guy like Andrei Svechnikov is just such a fun player that is unfortunately not able to blossom into the skater that he could be because of the system. But he's really like got really good length, really great speed, and great puck handling ability. And so it's sort of like a mixture of size and puck handling that the Canes have, that they're able to basically enter the offensive zone at will. It's just that they have trouble getting set up in the offensive zone.
Hmm.
But they're really able to gain the blue line most of the time as they can. A guy like Aho is just so crafty, able to do that. Um, I've talked ad nauseum about Svechnikov, but Jarvis being maybe a little bit more power, being able to skate through someone or at least dump and chase pretty decently well. Um, so I think that you can learn from the Canes at least that it's good to gain the blue line and on top
Yeah.
of everything we've talked about.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like a lot of the negative takeaways have to do with their offensive approach and structure, and a lot of the positive takeaways have to do with their defensive approach and sort of their transition game. They're really good at turning defense into offense, as you said. You're not going to spend a lot of time in the ozone when you playing against the Canes, and so I think that definitely is a positive takeaway for the Blues. And for what it's worth, I think that's something they did really well this year. I think Jordan Bennington and Joel Hofer, those goalies who are more able to handle the puck, really helped break you out of the defensive zone, as well as good skaters like Philip Broberg, who I love, of course, and will not go an episode without mentioning. Colton Parayko, sort of, and Cam Fowler, as kind of more offensive defensemen, honestly. Like, I mean, we saw a lot of offense from them this year. We saw Colton Parayko just able to skate the puck up the ice a lot this year under Montgomery's system. So yeah, I think that transition game, that defense, and the way that they're able to transition into the offensive zone, as you pointed out, is definitely a big positive takeaway when it comes to on ice play, on ice defensive strategy. So yeah, I like that for sure. Um, but it seems like in terms of roster building, and it's tough to say because like they do have great players. They've got a goalie in Freddie Anderson who his playoff
Oh, they have a
record is
terrific goalie.
is shaky, but yeah, a great goalie. And when he's
No,
healthy,
he's
health is
great.
the real issue
Yeah.
with Freddie. They've got fantastic defensemen in Jacob Slavin. He's probably the best defensive defenseman in the league. Brent Burns at 40 years old
Slavin is
is
so good.
he's so good. Brent Burns
I
at 40
love
years old is
Slavin.
still decent. Yeah, Slavin is awesome. Watching him in Four Nations was so fun.
Hmm.
Um, and then they've got like the mix of experience and youth in the forwards. Like Jarvis is 23 years old. Like Logan Stankoven is what, 22, 21? Like these are young guys who are contributing this year already. Seth Jarvis was their best player this year. It's tough to say for me that like they've built a bad roster. I think it really is just the downfall of their system is that it's so concrete that it can't flex. And it won't bend, it will break. That seems like the issue. Um, yeah, those are the remaining playoff teams. why don't we talk about a couple other teams who are sort of contenders, top teams, and what the Blues can learn from them. And I want to start with the Washington Capitals because this was a team who made the playoffs last season, but as a wild card, and it seemed like less they grabbed a hold of it and more like no one else did, and they were just kind of by default the ones who got that wild card spot. They were kind of dismantled by the New York Rangers last year, but this year, on the other hand, they were the best in the East in the regular season. And what they did this offseason, they made a lot of moves and sort of did that retool on the fly, as I said. And it seems like that sort of model is really relevant to what the Blues are doing. They don't want to tank. They want to more quickly re-enter their competitive window and try to be creative and crafty with how they do that. We've seen for such a long time that the winning formula across the NHL has been to, when your window is over, when it's closed, you tank. You try to get some high draft picks, and then you build that team back up from the ground in that way. And it takes a long time, but there's high highs and low lows. That's one way, and it seems like across sports, that's a strategy that a lot of teams will employ, especially in the city of Chicago. But if you don't want to do that, it seems like you just kind of have to live with a lower ceiling on your team. You have to be able to live with a team that is decent, can get into the playoffs, but doesn't have those really high highs that some of those other teams do. Um, but it seems like the Caps are trying to do something different from either of those, and maybe it'll wind up being the latter. Um, but they were a top team this year. They came out to a really strong start. Um, but it feels like the positive takeaway here is just rebuilding that competitor in multiple ways. And I think just being
Mhm.
creative, being crafty with how you make moves, how you build your roster, but also being bold, being willing to take chances on certain things. They've got their young guys contributing. Alexi Protas, Connor McMichael, Ryan Leonard. They're one of their top young players. Um, but I mean, their veteran players are also stepping up this year. I mean, the big story was Alex Ovechkin breaking the goal record, right? Um, but you had other
That
players, right?
helps.
Yeah, it definitely helps. It definitely helps when you've got the best goal scorer of all time on your roster. Um, but I mean, Dylan Strome had a great year. Um, Tom Wilson, I mean, he's a solid contributor for sure. John Carlson, older guy, but was solid as well this year. And then the other thing is taking a chance on players who, you know, aren't living up to expectations, might be struggling with where they're at elsewhere in the NHL, and the sort of standout candidate, or I guess standout example of that is Pierre-Luc Dubois, who looked a few years ago like he could be a star and then just kind of struggled wherever he went. It wasn't able to put it together. And so over the offseason, the Caps traded for him. They acquired him from the LA Kings in exchange for Darcy Kemper. Like that's one of those rare moves where I think both teams would do it again. And like it worked out for both of them. They got exactly what they needed from those two players that they acquired. Um, but it feels like to me just a diversity, the value of diverse roster building. Draft and develop is important, but also being willing to make big moves, sign big players, or trade for them is really important. And then you're not always gonna get the top guy, the star player. You're not always gonna win the free agency sweepstakes. Sometimes you got to find those diamonds in the rough, like a PLD or someone like that, or Logan Thompson who had a great year as well. So that's sort of to me the big takeaway. Um, Another team where it feels like playoff mentality might be a little lacking. It just felt like whenever things weren't going their way, they just had sort of like a mental block or would let their opponents get in their heads a lot. I mean, it that felt like an issue to me. Um, but yeah, that's sort of the main takeaway for me here with the Caps. What do you take away from the Caps this year, or big picture as well?
I think with the Caps, it'll be interesting to see how they come out next year. If
Right.
this was just like a 1-year wonder type
Yeah.
thing, but I mean, they were almost the President's Trophy winners. That's
Hmm.
kind of feels like that. I get Vancouver happened and is kind of a similar story, but it feels like they should at least be a wild card team again, right?
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so yeah, with the Caps, I think it is definitely the creativity of roster building is a big thing, which is actually how we saw Florida to put their roster together. I know a guy like
Yeah.
Verhage was a buy low candidate. Um, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know a lot of their guys, or at least like a couple from their core, were all like buy low candidates that they
Hmm.
sort of found off the scrap heap. Um, which isn't typically a hockey roster building thing that happens. There's just talent is so much more concentrated with the roster that only supports so many players. Um,
Yeah.
Also, I mean, Washington is one of the best draft and developed teams in the league. Have been for a while, and now seeing a guy like Prodige, I can't remember which one it
I
is.
think it's just
Uh,
Protus, I believe.
okay, Dylan Strome.
Hmm.
They've
Ryan Leonard.
really been able to Ryan Leonard. Yeah, exactly. Um, they were really really good at to draft and develop. So kind of the Dallas Stars model. But also, I mean, I think a big underrated part of this was getting a guy like Jacob Chikrin, who everyone
Hmm.
knew had sort of the defensive pedigree, was kind of the talking point of defense in the NHL for acquisitions when he was in at the time Arizona. Then got traded to Ottawa, and it was interesting that Ottawa gave up to him, but they just had such a log jam and didn't want to pay him the money, which I guess makes sense. But seeing an opportunity and sort of this was their Jim Montgomery, I would say, of seeing that they had a chance to acquire a real needle moving player for a sort of deflated price, and that's exactly what they did, and it worked out incredibly well for them. He this year signed a $7 by $9 million contract. Um, yeah, and so it's like you said, creativity, but really it's noticing league trends and noticing league discussions about who you're able to find and who is going to make a difference for you on your team,
Hmm.
and not just like I think this was, Army kind of was in the same boat. My goodness, I'm sorry. Dallas is getting it handed to them right now. They just got a touchdown scored on them. I love to see that. But um I think this was Doug Armstrong trying to do the same thing with like a Texier move of like a buy low candidate. Now, where Army may have failed and the Capitals succeeded was just the caliber of player. No one ever really expected Texier to be a top six guy, but that he could be a decent middle or bottom six contributor versus someone like a Mangiapane or a Pierre-Luc Dubois could be like first line wingers. And
Yeah.
so that's more like paying more to get better talent versus Army. We didn't really know what stage of the whatever we were in, and he decided that the lower hanging fruit, or that's not the right term to use. The smaller fish was the way to go about it. Well, now the league knows go for the big fish, and if it hits, it can be really exciting. If it doesn't, maybe you end up like the Vancouver Canucks, but you can turn that around in another year or two. So, yeah, I think you put that all really well.
Yeah, and like you said, for what it's worth, I think the Blues have done a good job of that in the early stages of rebuilding their contender. It's just a diversity of approach. You've got the young guys that you've drafted and developed, starting to make an impact. Your Zach Bolduc, your Jake Neighbors, soon to be Jimmy Snuggerud. But you've also got the creativity and identifying, key players you can acquire from elsewhere, Holloway and Broberg, namely. And then I'm really excited to see how they'll approach this offseason. What trades they can make, what free agents they'll sign, because I don't think they'll be shooting for the top of the market when it comes to free agents. Um, but I think there are some interesting names out there and guys that they can maybe turn into better players than they've been so far. Um, what are some other teams that you want to highlight here? Other contenders, other top teams that you think the Blues can learn something from?
I'll throw some names, but I'll only make a case for one of them. I mean, I think Tampa has been a good team for a very long time. Obviously, had their dynasty.
Hmm.
Toronto, I know, like, I know that the what we say about Toronto, but They have been a really good team for a long time, but the one that I think is the most interesting to me is Colorado.
Yeah.
Colorado has been one of the premier um, NHL rosters over the last couple of years. And I mean, I think that is a credit to their roster building and to really what it is with Colorado is they're obviously they have two of the two best players in the world in McKinnon and Makar. And obviously Landeskog too is like a top probably 10 skater when he's playing when he's healthy.
Hmm.
But I think the biggest thing with Colorado is their willingness to make moves and trades has kept them relevant for so long. They essentially turned this whole roster around this season, like in so many moves, trading away Rantanen for Natchez. They added Brock Nelson, Lindgren, who hasn't worked out, but they've tried everything. Letting a
Yeah.
guy like Nazem Kadri walk so that they could get uh, cap space. Um, with Colorado, I think the biggest thing is just it's obviously is getting complementary skill sets that you're able to lock up for 5 to 6 years or something like a Lehkonen, Nichushkin, Kadri when he was on the roster, etc. Who are all able to be complementary, but then also just being aggressive as a GM. You only get so many chances to win a Stanley Cup, and if your roster has holes, don't let it sit. Don't be Buffalo. Try and make a change. Try and do something. Shake it up because you never know how it's going to work. I mean, they won the Stanley Cup with Darcy Kemper in net, and then it started to not work, and decided, oh wait, yeah, he actually is a bad goalie. Let's make a change. Let's not be Edmonton and actually try and win this thing. And obviously, it's worked
Yeah.
out better
Alexander
for Edmonton
Georgiev.
this year. It's worked out better for Edmonton right now, but I mean, it was close. I think that was more just the Mikko Rantanen effect, and we'll see what happens in the Western Conference Final. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's what I got on Colorado.
Yeah, that's a great one for sure. Um, so it seems like when it comes to the Blues building a contender, the main takeaways here are the importance of depth, both offensively and defensively, building a good two-way team. And these are, I mean, a lot of these are straightforward, but just to sort of summarize, yeah, like depth is huge, both when it comes to scoring and when it comes to being a defensive team. Um, but building that depth out of players who fit your culture, fit the type of team you want to be, you know, being the type of team who is able to reach another level is really important. Um, and understanding the big moments and sort of rising to the occasion is really important. Um, but also building that depth creatively and utilizing a lot of approaches, but not being afraid to be bold in how they do that. And for what it's worth, I feel like the Blues have gotten off to a great start. It seems like they are building that kind of team. I think they've got a great base when it comes to their depth. They can add some more pieces towards the top. I think they shouldn't be prioritizing pieces to be depth pieces as much as they should be trying to find the finishing touches on this roster. Some of those more top players, but it feels like they've done a great start building that depth. Um, it feels like they're a decent two-way team. They turned their defense around this year, and surprisingly, that came from the forwards, as we've talked about a lot. Um, they've used a lot of different approaches. Last offseason, they used pretty much every single roster building strategy available to them, other than like maybe waivers. Although, did they make a waiver claim? I don't know. But they traded for players, they signed free agents, and then they signed players to offer sheets as well. Like they are doing that, and then they've also started to build this culture, this identity, and then this team, this sort of scrappy little team, went on a run, made it to the playoffs, and really gave the President's Trophy winners a hard time. They almost won that series. Um, they should have. It still hurts, but um, I think they're off to a great start. What do you think they need to do to sort of cross that finish line to sort of get there? And it's easier said than done for sure. And I think there's a lot that we could point to, but sort of when you're thinking big picture, maybe 30,000 foot view, like what are the key goals the Blues should be looking to accomplish to sort of become a contender again?
Well, two things. First of all, I'd say they're kind of already a contender. Just with the strides that we saw last season, I would say that the Blues are going to be at least considered to be in the playoff race, and with that man in net, there's not much more you could ask for in a series. But obviously didn't go our way this way. Let's not rehash that. I think it's they found some really really complementary skill sets. I think with a guy like Cam Fowler is a really big one, but there's still a couple pieces on the roster. There's still a couple places that they could upgrade and perhaps find a little bit better of a complementary idea to help. And I think the way that they have to do that is adopt the Colorado Avalanche model of being aggressive. I think, that number 4 defenseman, Justin Falk, just isn't really helping out this team. Nick Leddy just isn't really helping out this team. Um, I would say Walker and Toropchenko had good years, but if that regresses, you're going to want to shake up that bottom 6 because even a fourth line, as we saw, can be really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, yeah, I mean, there's still some like wants. I think you'd want to upgrade 2C. You'd want to find maybe a number 1 winger or a first line winger or someone of that caliber. But I don't know that those are necessarily like needs for this roster. I really do think it's the complementary pieces of like the bottom 6 and the bottom 4 defensemen that if you could shore those up, make those as strengths and not weaknesses, there are no holes on this roster then. And maybe you could upgrade certain parts like Braden Shen at 2C, as I want them to do, is my number 1 wish for the offseason. But if you want to get that 5% better, if you can make there be 0 weaknesses on this team, I think that can push you over the top.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Get younger on defense, and then build that center depth. I like it a lot. And like I said, I think they're off to a great start to build that team. So the expectation, as we've said multiple times, is to make the playoffs now. I think we'll be really excited to see what they do this offseason to accomplish that goal, to improve, to break the 100-point threshold, and then especially to get off to a solid start at the beginning of the season. It seemed like
Mm-hmm.
that went a long way for a lot of teams,
Yeah.
especially those top 2 teams in the league, Winnipeg Jets and Washington Capitals. Those were the 2 hottest teams at the beginning of the season, and so that'll be really important for the Blues to do um, at the beginning of next season. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how they add onto this roster this offseason. I think there are some free agent signings or trades coming our way. We've started to talk about that a little bit. If you want to hear more about an offseason preview, both with regards to Blues players already on the roster, what they should do with those players. Should they trade away Justin Falk? Should they extend Holloway and Broberg? We had an episode about that recently, an offseason preview. But if you also want to hear more about targets we think the Blues should have this offseason, which players they should look to sign in free agency or look to acquire via trade, we talked about that recently too. I think it's 2 episodes ago now. So definitely go check that out as well. We're going to continue to provide off-season content all summer long. We'll be here twice a week. We go live twice a week. So that's 2 episodes a week that you can come join us, be active in the chat, throw us questions, let us know your thoughts on the things we're saying. So the best way to continue to keep up with all the latest Blues news and follow along with us is to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. It's the best way to help us out. Like this video if you're listening on audio, follow, rate, review. That really does help. And then follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod. You can follow us there. Throw us comments, that kind of stuff. We love to engage with everyone over there. We post a lot of great stuff, announce when we're going live, when we have special guests, all that kind of stuff. So be sure to do all those. Thanks to those that have already, and thanks as well for tuning in this time. We'll see you next time here on Note News. And as always, let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.